Hello, Varlets. Today I'm going to be taking you through a very good all-around Zealot Preacher build. Um, if you haven't checked out my Veteran Sharpshooter Auto Pistol build guide or gameplay walkthrough, I'll put some links in the description for those. I do think in terms of getting your feet wet into High Intensity Damnation runs in Darktide, that is a much lower skill gap, and it pretty much can deal with anything in the game quite easily. But this is what I've found to be the closest thing to an all-around build with the Preacher. Um, it's going to be a lot harder to take down a lot of things all at the same time. It is far harder because you need to conserve more ammo. And I will put a link in the description to a gameplay walkthrough I do with this build, just to show you how it works in real time, as it were. That being said, I'm going to come back to the gear because firstly I want to explain how this build works with the feats. Number one, we've got Faith Restored, 50% toughness damage reduction on critical hit for 4 seconds. This is one of the linchpins to this build and why we're picking the melee weapon we're picking. But just remember that critical hits is going to basically mean that everything coming at you for 4 seconds, every time you crit, is going to be reduced by 50% damage to your toughness. So that's the crucial aspect to this build. Um, this is going to give you a 10% crit chance to bleeding enemies, but it's also going to mean that crits apply bleed, so it sort of synergizes with itself in that sense. The more you crit, the more things bleed, the more things are bleeding, the more you crit. So next we have Benediction, 15% toughness damage reduction to allies and coherency. This is just a great feat to take, and stacking on top of that 50% you're going to get for your crits means your toughness is going to take a lot less damage as you move through the game. I personally go with Holy Revenant here. I think it is a great skill that allows a lot of forgiveness to bad players such as myself. Um, Thy Wrath Be Swift, I think, is the higher skill level, more effective feat choice here. But in terms of getting into high level damnation, you're going to make mistakes. This skill gives you a lot of forgiveness when your passive procs, which is, find it here, until death every 90 seconds, taking damage that would kill you. You gain invulnerability for 5 seconds. While this is active, you're going to be dealing as much damage as you possibly can, and you're going to heal back from it. So, it gives this build a lot of sort of clutch potential, extra survivability, and maybe it means you don't need to go for that Medicae station in lieu of one of your teammates who needs it a bit more. Um, Next we have Rising Conviction. Hitting an enemy with a melee attack increases your damage by 4% for 5 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. This is a great feat with this build because you are really going for a lot of hits. So the more you hit, the faster you hit, which means you hit more, which means you crit more, which means you proc your Faith Restored more. And then Invocation of Death, because we're going to be critically hitting so much, this is actually the choice for your F key ability, Chastise the Wicked. You can basically just, as long as you're in melee and just wailing away on people as fast as you possibly can and just applying all those crits, you're going to have your Chastise the Wicked F key up at all times pretty much, and that synergizes really well with this build because Chastise the Wicked not only replenishes toughness, not only increases the damage of your next melee hit, but it makes your next melee hit a guaranteed critical. So you're going to use your F key, you're going to crit, that's going to reduce the cooldown of Chastise the Wicked, that's going to make the enemy bleed, which is going to give you an extra % chance to melee critical hit, which is going to keep your toughness damage reduction going, refresh your F key, and round we go. This build just synergizes really well with itself. That being said, if you get really good with this, you may want to try swinging over to Thy Wrath Be Swift. It can be a very, very effective feat. And if you're having trouble sticking in melee and really taking advantage of that extra cooldown reduction, Purge the Wicked isn't a bad choice here, as it lets you do your F key twice instead of just once. But I do think you'll have more uses of your F key with Invocation of Death on this build. So that being said, let's head on over to the loadout. We've got the Atrox MK2 Tactical Axe, or Mark II Tactical Axe. This is definitely the weapon of choice for this build. You can go with a combat blade. You'll see I've got a really good one, and really go for that bleed build, but that's not what we're really going for here. What we're going for here is a maximum critical chance, which is why we have Shred as a blessing on this. I think you're probably good with a tier 3, but tier 4 is obviously the ideal here for Shred. It's an absolute must. Ideally on your perks, you've got 25% damage to flak armored, and you've actually got 5% chance to critical hit. Unfortunately, I haven't rolled that god tier weapon on this yet, but you know, it still does the job just fine. For your second blessing, you're going to want brutal momentum. Anything in there, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, it's all good. But try to get as high on a shred blessing as you can. Try to go for some extra critical chance in your perks, and for your damage, I personally think flak armored is the choice. But this is what I've got running. For your ranged weapon, we're going to go with the Lock Mark IIB Spearhead Bolt Gun. Now, the Bolter is an amazing weapon. It's got amazing damage. It's got decent range. It's probably the best gun in the game for sorting out crushers, for sorting out bulwarks with very, very low skill. You just point your primary and fire away. With pinning fire and shattering impact, you're going to absolutely decimate a crusher, potentially multiple. The trick to this is you want things to be grouped up to really proc that pinning fire. You can definitely go for a solo unit, but it's actually better if that crusher has a few things around it, and the splash damage is going to stagger everything all at once and give you that maximum pinning fire. And you definitely want, I would say, plus 10% range damage to elites on this, as that gives you a full scope across all the different things you're going to be going after with this bolter, rather than focusing carapace armor, which isn't going to help you against bulwarks and probably not going to help you much against reapers. Definitely won't help you against anything, obviously, with flak armor. I happened to have 25% damage to maniacs on this. I find that's quite useful, but you know, extra crit chance would be a great secondary, or you know, throw in elites plus carapace if you just really want to be a crusher focused damage dealer. The trick to this spearhead bolt gun, however, as you'll see in my gameplay video, again link in the description, is that it's not going to give you a lot of ammo that you can use. You really aren't going to be a ranged heavy character. You have to focus a lot on using your tactical axe, which creates a lot of skill gap in terms of, you know, you need to be able to dodge, you need to be able to slide, you need to be able to bridge the gap between yourself and ranged mobs that are spread out all over the place while not taking too much damage. This is a fairly challenging build to use, but once you get the swing of it, it is horrifically effective, and it can really sort out some of those harder things like crushers for your team, um, which, as an example, my veteran sharpshooter build, link in the description, really does actually struggle with. So I think the weaknesses of this build actually pair really nicely with the weaknesses in that veteran sharpshooter auto pistol build. And if you have somebody that you duo with regularly, and one of you can run one of each of these builds, I think you can pretty much handle anything in the game with these two builds in conjunction with each other, where you can really sort out crushers and be an unkillable tank in melee. They can be an unkillable tank in ranged and really sort out all those ranged mobs quickly for you with limitless ammo, and also replenishing your ammo in the process, which will be crucial to maintaining this bolter's effectiveness. In terms of curios, this is actually really flexible, guys. I think 2 toughness, 1 health, or 2 health, 1 toughness is the way to go here. Um, you definitely want at least a little bit of extra toughness, because so much of this build relies upon keeping your toughness as your tankable item. It's not really about stacking health. It's not really about getting those martyr stacks. It really is about just making sure you're not taking damage from applying critical hits and making yourself, basically an unbreakable toughness bar in melee. Um, but that being said, a preacher really benefits a lot more from health than from toughness in terms of the percentage of what it gives you. 20% health gives you significantly more health than 17% toughness gives you of toughness. So mathematically speaking, I recommend 2 health, 1 toughness, but if you really are struggling keeping your toughness bar up, you can switch that to 2 toughness, 1 health. In terms of what you stack at the bottom end of that, I highly recommend toughness regen speed, as that's what you're really going for, and then finding that damage resistance for the things you're going to struggle with the most. I can tell you from my standpoint, what I struggle with the most on this build are gunners and snipers, with a bit in terms of bombers as well, because basically my ability to, bridge gaps between myself and snipers is fairly limited. I have very limited ammo in the bolter. I don't necessarily want to be, face tanking and shooting those when something like a veteran sharpshooter can deal with them a lot more effectively. So while I'm in melee, the things that are hurting me the most are going to be those long range things like snipers, gunners, bombers. So that's the build. I hope this works for you. Please check the link in the description for my gameplay walkthrough, and good luck out there. I hope you slay some heretics.